Really good to see everyone this morning. I'm here in the DC area. Many of those of us who are part of the Center for Mindful Living and the Insight Meditation community of Washington, obviously here in the Washington DC area. And it is a very hot day again today, and humidity in the 70% and 80 or whatever. So I hope you're comfortable. I hope you're well, and really want to warmly welcome everyone to this, excuse me, to this weekly meditation class. For those who are here for the first time, I'm Hugh Byrne. I'm a teacher, longtime teacher with the Insight Meditation community of Washington, and part of the Center for Mindful Living, the center in Tenleytown, Northwest DC. And I think we're in somewhere around about our 20th week online now. So it's pretty much a well-oiled machine, except when I try and share my screen in a few minutes, that might be a little different, but we'll see. So just want to, again, just welcome everyone. I want to share with you the theme of the talk today. We'll begin with a talk. It doesn't tend to be a long Dharma talk, but maybe somewhere in the region of 20-25 minutes. And then we'll go into a meditation, and we'll have some opportunity for sharing, probably in the large group today. And then Emily will lead us in some mindful movement. It's lovely to consciously come into our bodies and bring mindfulness to our bodies in movement. And then we'll have a closing meditation, depending on how much time is left then. We're kind of in the process of shifting, making the class a little bit longer to 12:15. Just because with the different pieces, it tends to be a little squashed to try and get everything done by 12. But of course, it's different from being kind of in a meditation hall where getting up and leaving, might be disruptive. If you have to leave, in the final meditation, probably no one will notice because they have their eyes closed. So, if you need to leave at 12, obviously that's fine. But it will be probably a few minutes after 12, maybe even up to 12:10, 12:15. We may finish today. And then there's, people are free to stay around in the online kind of lunch group, post class lunch group. So the theme today is coming home to our heart, coming home to our heart. And what I want to do is I want to share my screen and just share this photo. I may share a couple of other photos and really begin with a reflection on John Lewis, who, as you all know, I think, died on Friday. And you can read a huge amount or just turn on CNN or one of the other channels today over this weekend, and probably you'll see hour-long specials. You can read the obituary in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and other papers. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the biography, his biography. I'll touch on a few things. But I do want to mention that there's a wonderful documentary that's come out just very, very recently on his life called Good Trouble. And I think it's Amazon Prime. I watched it yesterday, and it's outstanding. So if you get a chance, we'll share that in the chat. But try and see that. Good Trouble. And if you don't know the meaning for him of good trouble, I'll just share in a minute a few words about that. But where I want to start really is to say that John Lewis really was a bodhisattva. and step back a little again for those who aren't familiar with the term, and I think probably most will be, but if you're not, a bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition is someone who consciously not gives their life, but has the intention of living for the benefit of all beings, that their commitment is of their life really is to compassion. Obviously caring for themselves as part of that compassion, but really caring for the world. And it's an archetype. It means, Bodhi means awakening, and sattva means a being. So it's a being committed to awakening, on the path to awakening. And I see, even though it's a kind of word from the Buddhist tradition, an archetype from the Buddhist tradition, I think it's very, very relevant to anyone who really, in the way that John Lewis lived his life, commits his life with compassion and caring and love for the benefit of all beings, genuinely of all beings. And obviously you could say the same about Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. And I think of many others. I think of Nelson Mandela, and I've talked at other times about Mandela. And, in the Buddhist tradition, obviously, there's the Dalai Lama, there's Thich Nhat Hanh, who are really embodiments of the Bodhisattva. And even though John Lewis, like Dr. King, was deeply rooted in the Christian tradition, and specifically the African American church that had its roots in struggling against the sins and the abominations of slavery and of Jim Crow. But John Lewis, like Dr. King, like Nelson Mandela and others, lived out his life, the vision and commitment of a bodhisattva. And as I mentioned, you can get a lot more information if you don't know, you're not that familiar with John Lewis. There's a huge amount of information just to go to the front page of the newspaper today, and you'll read more than enough to get a sense of the arc of his life. For the last, just a personal level, for the last 25 years or so for me, and as for many others, John Lewis has been someone who really embodied courage, compassion, love, and generosity. He was, excuse me, he was arrested 40 times during the 1960s, during the civil rights struggle, and 5 more times when he was a congressman from the Atlanta area. As you may know, he was bloodied and beaten unconscious more than once, and this is a kind of emblematic, almost iconic photo of him on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, as you might know, named after a grand wizard, I think, of the Ku Klux Klan, Edmund Pettus Bridge. And the civil rights marchers were saying we have the right to march across the bridge. And then there's perhaps even more famous photo of the trooper, cracking down with a nightstick on John Lewis's head and him lying on the ground. He also, spent, all of the 60s up to the mid 60s of occupying lunch counters, and obviously that, many, many times demonstrating, protesting, speaking for the rights of African Americans and all people to be able to vote and to be able to live lives of decency, free from want, free from oppression. He spoke along with Dr. King at the March on Washington in August 1963. And then he went on to represent his district in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Congress for over 30 years, coming up 34 years. He was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama back in 2011. There it is. When he was first arrested and went home to his parents were ashamed of him. They said to him, we're really ashamed. They had told him not to get into trouble. And obviously, growing up in the Jim Crow era in the South, they feared that, getting into trouble could lead to all sorts of harm, could lead to them losing the farm that they had bought, saved up $300 from their sharecropping wages to buy. So they were really fearful of what it meant for him to get arrested. They said, don't get into trouble. He said, well, what about the colored only signs? And they say, that's the way it is. Don't get into trouble. But he reframed trouble. He said he was determined to get into trouble, but as he said, good trouble, necessary trouble. And that's the way he lived his life for the next 60 years. Some of the things he said that have really stayed with me are you only pass this way once. You've got to give it all you've got. You only pass this way once. You've got to give it all you've got. And he said, as long as I have breath in my body, I'll do what I can. And one of the things that he gained from the struggle and being willing to sit down at lunch counters and be spat upon, have cigarette butts stubbed out in the back or in the head and being beaten and bloodied. He said, I lost my fear. He said, when you lose your sense of fear, you're free. When you lose your sense of fear, you're free. He said, you've got to be hopeful. You've got to be optimistic. You get knocked down, you get up. You've got to keep going. When, as a fruit, really, one of the fruits of all of the heroic struggles of the 50s and 60s and even earlier for civil rights and for dignity, one of the fruits was the election of Barack Obama in 2008. And when Barack Obama was elected, John Lewis said, I cried uncontrollably. And at Obama's inauguration, John Lewis asked him to sign something for him. And Barack Obama wrote on a piece of paper, this is because of you, John. This is because of you, John. And in 2013, at Barack Obama's second inauguration, after his re-election, he wrote again, this is still because of you, John. This is still because of you, John. And if we fast forward a few years to the current era that we're in, particularly these last 4 or going on 4 years, he continued the struggle in Congress. He didn't go to the current president's inauguration, feeling that he hadn't been elected fairly. And coming forward to these months we're in now in the midst of the pandemic and the uprising for racial justice, particularly after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, John Lewis, who was struggling with pancreatic cancer, which he he announced in the late December of last year, 2019, and was dealing with that. He said, after the killing of George Floyd, he said, "It was so painful, it made me cry." People now understand what the struggle was all about. It's another step down a very, very long road toward freedom, justice for all humankind, justice for all humankind. And seeing the huge demonstrations going on around the country, the thousands of demonstrations, in the big cities, but even in small rural areas and in the suburbs. I'm going to share another photo. Here, as you can probably recognize, this is down outside the White House on 16th Street in Washington, D.C., with the huge letters of Black Lives Matter painted all across the street. This was his last public appearance, was last month. He was there with Mayor Muriel Bowser, the D.C. Mayor of Washington, D.C. And here he is kind of standing there in the huge Black Lives Matter painted there all across the street, right next to the White House. And seeing the huge demonstrations around the country and around the world, John Lewis said, "This feels and looks so different. It's so much more massive and all-inclusive. There will be no turning back." And so this morning, I want to invite us to hold John Lewis and his courage and his beautiful, courageous life in our hearts and come back, kind of leading into the reflection, the talk for today of coming home to our heart. It's very much linked to what I've just shared about John Lewis. Maybe in talk a little bit about how we come home to our heart. I'll talk a little bit personally about how this weekend, John Lewis and his passing helped me come home to my heart. And just to kind of shift a little bit, I want to say, and I'll stop screen sharing now, and we'll come back to the regular view. I've spoken in recent months about a kind of a theme, a notion of unmourned grief. And it kind of has a specific meaning, and I've kind of taken that meaning and broadened it somewhat. It comes out of work that has been done particularly with military veterans who've done or seen terrible things and hold within them a grief that they haven't been able to process. And so this term has developed of unmourned grief. And a lot of work has been done, often with veterans late in their lives, to help them help them to come to terms with, help them open to that grief. So it isn't just kind of stuck there. I remember my own father who fought in the RAF, in the Royal Air Force in World War II, and how he wouldn't hardly ever talk about the war. Maybe sometimes, occasionally, in a kind of joking way. And as I see it, this notion can be very helpful for the time we're living in. In these times, there are so many things happening, and some of them are terrible things that are happening. Some of them are things that we really need time to take in and process the significance of them. I mean, one is just the level of loss around the pandemic, the loss of lives. Maybe for many of it's not close family members or great good friends, but already it's coming up to, I think, 140,000 in the United States have died, and probably three times that many worldwide. The loss of life, the economic impact and the social impact, and all of the impact of loss of work, loss of livelihood, loss of businesses that people are suffering. There's a kind of a scale to that and a magnitude to that we really need some space and time, I believe, to allow ourselves to process. And then along with that, we have police killings of unarmed people of color. We have children being separated from tiny kids separated from their parents and from their loved ones, and locked in cages, essentially. We have mass killings, mass shootings, because we don't have laws to limit the sale and transfer of firearms. We have pardons of criminals because they're closely connected to a political leader. I could spend the next half an hour, and obviously I'm not going to, but I believe we really need time to process and really metabolize the suffering, the pain. Sometimes it's anger, it's outrage, but we don't really have time to feel it enough before the next thing comes along and our attention goes somewhere else, and then there's something else. And it's almost, it can feel, I think, like a kind of whiplash. And I come back a lot to what the great psychologist Carl Jung said. What we don't bring into consciousness comes to us as fate. What is not brought into consciousness comes to us as fate. So it's another way of saying, if we don't allow ourselves to really feel what we're feeling, to let our emotions kind of be felt, be processed, to let our bodily sensations be felt, let the thoughts in our minds be really fully processed, as we do with these practices of mindfulness and compassion. At the very core is seeing kind of the emptiness of emotions, that they're not anything solid or real. They're kind of more like energies that come and go. They're more like kind of weather systems that come and go. But when we get caught up in them, or we're not able to process them, then we get locked into suffering. Then we experience contraction. We experience all sorts of painful emotions and mind states. Sometimes they're pushed under. A lot they're pushed under. They're pushed under, consciousness, but they're still affecting us. They're not fully metabolized in our psyche, in our consciousness, in our being. So they can come out in ways where, we might get angry without really knowing why we're getting angry. We might grieve without even knowing why we're grieving. We might get sick without even knowing what it is that's really sickening us. If we're really stressed or anxious, it'll come out in other ways. So this notion of unmourned grief, just as a kind of perhaps a helpful way of seeing, and I've spoken about that some in recent times as well. It's a way of seeing, just a way of helping us kind of understand something about what we're going through, in these times, and really the importance of being able to process our emotions, to metabolize our mind states, our bodily sensations, our our thoughts and beliefs, that we can kind of bring them into consciousness. Because what is brought to consciousness, to kind of turn Jung the other way around, what is brought to consciousness comes to us as freedom, potentially comes to us as freedom. Because when we bring something into awareness, we can see, okay, it doesn't have to, I can see it. I can see this fear and allow it to come, allow it to go, without getting kind of either having to suppress it or having to act it out. We can allow ourselves to fully feel what we're feeling. We can bring awareness to our thinking so we don't just get caught up in, proliferation. And the other side of this is, if we don't find a way to open to all that we're feeling, really to come home to our heart, then we're really not able to live wholeheartedly, to connect fully with our lives, with others, to feel joy, to express love and compassion and caring. Because where we'll be is in a state of contraction. We'll be in a state of separation. We'll be in a state of self and other, I've got to protect myself. And so we tend to very easily, see somebody else as a problem, or, an enemy, or somebody in our way, or whatever. So kind of framing this notion of unmourned grief, and this sense of the importance of coming home to our heart. And just kind of want to share a little bit on a personal level. Twice in the last 3 months, I've found my way to grief that has been a way of opening my heart. The first time was about 2 or 3 months ago. And there's a teacher, and I've shared this somewhat with other groups and maybe a little bit earlier, but there's a teacher in the UK, his name's Rob Burbea, and we'll put the name in the chat box, Burbea. He's a really beloved teacher who taught at Gaia House down in Devon in England, the UK. And I didn't know him well. He wasn't a close friend, but I'd met him maybe once or twice, and certainly one time at a meeting I was at down there. Probably sat retreats with him in the 1990s up at the Insight Meditation Society up in Barre, Massachusetts. But since everyone's silent in the retreat, you don't necessarily know who's there. But I know he was living in the Boston area and he was practicing at the same time, and we shared the same teacher at the same time. And I got to, over the last few years, listen to, a few dozen of his meditations. And I really connected with him. And I, as he got sick, he came down as well with, I believe it was pancreatic cancer, like John Lewis. I tried to, share some dharma and stay connected with him in that way. And then as he moved towards his death, his close colleagues organized a Zoom meeting like this. It was actually after one of our Sunday classes. And there were 272 people who'd studied with him or who were friends with him, maybe a few family members as well. But basically the Sangha, the community, people from all over the world. And he wasn't able to be there because he was too sick at that time to actually speak. But he was being, the information was sharing the wishes for him. I remember I shared that, just a gratitude to him for his teachings and his life. But what was very interesting for me on that call with, nearly 300 people was I felt, and again, not knowing him personally in a close way, I felt this deep, deep well of grief that just kept coming up. And I, I cried, just for I don't know, 15 minutes, just this fountain of tears They weren't like pain. It wasn't painful grief. It was a sense of, it was almost like a joy in there. And I found it really interesting because how it felt to me was everything that I hadn't fully processed about the pandemic and the loss of life and, all that was going on. George Floyd hadn't been killed yet at that time, but it was as though everything was being processed through this, this impending or upcoming loss of this beloved teacher. And for me, that being able to do that really helped me come home to my heart. It was truly a coming home to my heart. And I could, I could live more spaciously, more freely, more openly, with less contraction just by that experience. And that's something, obviously it's fairly recent, and it's stuck with me. It's obviously stayed with me, and I continue to listen to Rob's talks, and that's very much part of my practice and part of my life. And it was interesting, and just to kind of fast forward a few months, just to this weekend, for some, when I heard the news on Friday night, it was interesting. It was I felt numb at the time. I felt numb. And John Lewis was somebody I knew I was going to grieve for him, as many of us knew that once we knew he had pancreatic cancer. And yet when it happened and I went to sleep, and it really hadn't hit me. It had hit me here and hadn't fully gone down into my heart. But the next morning, something happened. And I think it was just a friend sharing the obituary of the New York Times and just connecting. And it was the same thing again. It was just this well of grief, of tears, but again, just in a beautiful feeling. It was almost like as much joy and gratitude as it wasn't the pain of losing, your partner or your spouse or your loved one, where there's much more complexity to it. It had a lack of complexity, had a kind of almost a purity and a joy to it. And again, what it helped me to do was the commitment I made was just for the weekend, for this whole weekend, to have it be a kind of, for myself, a meditation retreat, a retreat where I remember and reflect on John Lewis and his life, where I feel gratitude to him for his courage and for his compassion and for his love. And again, it was as though, as the same with this experience with Rob, as though everything that had happened around the police killings and the uprisings and being here in the middle of this political season and the hopes and the anxieties and fears, I'm sure you can relate to those, all came up and something transformed in the process. All of this is just kind of to give that as a kind of a way for me that of coming home to my heart, that, for whatever reason, that I'd been a lot in my head and, in the tightness that we're all, I think, in many ways kind of negotiating, getting through these times, a lot of kind of fight or flight that we're in. And so just the importance of coming home to our hearts. I remember a bodhisattva of a different kind who I love and loved, and Leonard Cohen, who said, the heart has got to open in a fundamental way. If you know that line, the heart has got to open in a fundamental way. The next line, if you know it, is democracy is coming to the USA. Take that as you will, written back in the early 90s, actually, and the democracy from his song Democracy. We need to find our way to our heart, to our connection with others, with ourselves, our connection to love, to gratitude, to generosity, to forgiveness, to joy, to all of these wholesome states of heart and mind. And where I'm going to finish is with what may turn into a whole separate talk at a later time. And that is that I see three main ways to come back to our hearts. I think it's important for us to reflect, how do we come back to our hearts? And what's come up for me, and these aren't somebody else's framing of it, but that I'm taken from, but just what's come up for me, is the three ways are first I think of it as grace or mystery. And what Rob's death and dying, and John Lewis's death and his dying and his life, came to me as grace. It came to me as grace. I hope it comes to others as grace too. It just comes out of the causes and conditions of this is when it happened. This is when his life came to an end. But it came to land for me, and I'm sure for many of you in different ways, as I think of this as grace. So it was grace that allowed my heart to open in the case of 2 or 3 months ago, and grace again. Something happens and our hearts open. It doesn't have to be somebody dying. It could be something else in our lives. Something happens and our hearts open. It comes as a gift, and in a sense as a mystery. The second is, and these come to a kind of more the regular Dharma framing of the practice. Then the first is what happens when we abandon unskillful states of heart and mind. When we let go of craving or anger or delusion, or any of the kind of the ways we create suffering. When we find a way to let go of our anger, or let go of our blaming or our judgment, or let go of our craving, then what happens is there is a natural opening of the heart. So that's I see the second pathway in to opening of our hearts, that through the letting go, abandoning the unskillful, and I think what's important when we abandon the unskillful and the heart opens is that we really take time to allow ourselves to feel the heart opening, not just kind of move on to the next thing, but to kind of feel, how does it feel to let go of blame? How does it feel to let go of anger? How does it feel in my body? How does it feel in my heart? How does it feel in my mind? How does it feel in my being as a whole, my consciousness? And allow ourselves to feel that, because it's that developing the familiarity with our experience, with joy, with compassion, with love, that helps us to nurture it and grow it in our lives. So it becomes more of the default rather than, just something that comes up now and again. It becomes more where we're living our lives from. So that's the second path. And the third is through a conscious cultivation. So we're all probably familiar with how we cultivate loving kindness, or how we cultivate compassion, how we cultivate equanimity or forgiveness, typically through formal practices. With loving kindness, it's often the words and phrases, not that they're so essential, but may I be happy, may I be safe. The phrases can be really helpful, but also experiencing the feelings in the body, the felt sense. And thirdly, just the visualization, visualizing ourselves, visualizing others, using the kind of the imagination. So those three elements, the kind of the more cognitive of the phrases, the more kinesthetic of the bodily feelings, and the more kind of the imagination of the visualization. So I'll come back to that, to kind of this as a kind of a framing, I think, in the future. But my hope is that something that I've shared here has been helpful. And what I'd like to do is just to leave that there and sit with whatever is alive for you, and to move into the to the opening meditation. It's kind of a little bit on from opening now, but it's the first meditation. So take your time coming into a posture that's relaxed and comfortable. So take a few moments to find a posture that's one of these. Let your chest be open. You can relax your shoulders. Close your eyes if you'd like to do that. Or keep them open with a soft, unfocused gaze, maybe looking down in front of you. Not looking at anything in particular, but just soft gaze. Just check into your body. You might consciously let the attention drop down out of the thinking mode, down into the body. Feel your body on the surface beneath you, on the chair, or on the cushion, or if you're lying down, excuse me, if you're lying down, just contact with the surface beneath you. Or if you're standing up or walking, feeling the surface beneath your feet. Feel the weight of your body pressing down. Feel the sensations in your body from the from the inside. And you might consciously invite your breathing to deepen. So taking some longer, fuller, deeper breaths. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. As you breathe in, nice full deep in breath, you bring energy into the body, and then as you breathe out, you naturally relax the body. It's energizing, relaxing, letting go on the out breath. You might consciously invite a quality of calm into the body, into the mind, as you breathe in and breathe out. Breathing in, relaxing the body. Breathing out, relaxing the mind. See if you can let the deeper breathing be a way of letting you relax and settle into being here right now. Being present. Letting go of plans and memories. And when you're ready, letting the breath come back to its natural rhythm. And you could stay with your breathing without breathing deeply, but just aware of the breath. as a way of staying as present as you can, just breathing in and breathing out. You could invite a smile to your face as a way of helping soften any tension, as a way of gladdening the mind, gladdening the heart, bringing perhaps some joy into the heart and the mind. Thinking of a loved one, if that's helpful, or a pet, or a child or grandchild. Someone who easily kind of lights you up, makes you feel happy, joyful. And invite an attitude of kindness and acceptance to whatever's present for you, whatever's present in the body, in the heart, in the mind. Kind, receptive awareness of whatever's present for you. See if you can meet whatever comes up with kindness, with care, with acceptance. In Rumi's phrase, a Sufi poet, welcoming the guests. If that's a helpful image to you of guests coming to visit, he says, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. Experiencing the sensations of breathing in and breathing out, and letting that be your home base, if that's helpful to you. And if you do find yourself kind of going off into thoughts, planning, worrying, remembering, daydreaming, just gently and kindly come back to the body, come back to the breath, come back to this moment. So we're choosing to kind of step out of the story and back to the present, back to this moment, this breath. not to beat ourselves up for losing our attention. It's not a problem when the mind goes off. It's really the noticing and the coming back is part and an important part of the training of our hearts and our minds to be here, to make being here more of our kind of natural home, our default. And if a strong emotion or a mind state or a strong bodily feeling calls for your attention, if it's more than just kind of something coming and going, you might let your attention go there, consciously move your attention to it. So if it was sadness, for example, you can just let your attention go to where you're feeling it in your body. Maybe it's in the heart area. Maybe it's around the eyes or somewhere else. Just with kindness, bring attention to your feelings. If it's strong or it's difficult, you could put your hand on your heart or on your belly. Just bring a quality of caring, of kindness to your own experience. Could be, say, a word to yourself of care or love or peace, ease. And allow yourself to feel whatever sensations are coming, whatever's moving through you. See if you can make space to allow them to come, to express themselves, and then to pass when they're ready to pass. They're like the image of a storm coming through. The clouds come and drop the rain, or the sleet, or the hail, or whatever. And then when they're done, they move on, like a weather system. We don't need to do anything about the weather system. Obviously we might come indoors or change what we do, but this weather system's going to just come and do its thing. In the same way, if we can meet our emotions and our mind states, it's just coming and going. And if we don't get into a conflict with them, a struggle with them, either to hold on to them or push them away or to space out, then they come and go. In the words of the Tibetan Buddhism, they self-liberate. They self-liberate. So see how it is to meet strong feelings, strong emotions in this way. Meet difficult thoughts without following them or repressing them, but just to let them, see them come and go. In this last minute or two of the meditation, just holding whatever's present with kindness, letting everything come and go. And I'll finish with this poem by another beloved being who left us quite recently, just a year and a bit more ago, Mary Oliver. This is her poem, When Death Comes. When death comes like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps his purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it like? What is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does towards silence. And each body a lion of courage, and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride, married to amazement. I was a bridegroom, taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. Looking at the time, I'm going to invite Emily to take us into some movement, and then when after the movement, perhaps take a few minutes of sharing, and people can obviously share in the chat room as well, just what's coming up for you. If anyone would like to, share anything, how you're holding, the passing of John Lewis, or anything else that's going on. So if Emily is ready to take over for the next few minutes.
Yes. So come to standing, and for a moment, feel the earth beneath your feet, and then with palms out, up, lift your arms, reaching up, and cultivate the energy of the sky and the sun and all that flies in nature above us, and bring that energy to your heart. And gather the energy of this group, the kindness and the compassion, the love we hold for each other, and bring that energy to your heart. And gather the energy of the earth, that which sustains us with such abundance, providing vital nutrients, and bring that to your heart. We'll begin with cactus arms, elbows bent, and we'll be moving 3 times to the right. Notice your right hand. And take a deep breath in. Exhale, right. And center. Right. And center. And right. And center. Take another deep inhale. And exhale, left. And center. And left. And center. And left. And center. Hold your elbows up and drop your hands down. And rise. And down. And then float your arms down, shaking it out, noticing how your body is moving in this moment and where your breath is. And then raise your arms again and grasp your right wrist in your left hand. Take a deep inhale in and exhale, tilt towards the left. Noticing the stretch from the base of your right hip out through your fingertips. Another short breath in here. And exhale to center. And switch wrists. Inhaling deeply. Tilt to the right. Lengthening along the left side of your body. Breathing into your left rib cage. And exhale to center. Float those arms down. Now, to do a gentle back bend, clasp your hands behind your waist. Take in a deep inhale. And exhale, lengthen the arms away from your body, lifting up your chest and opening. And bring the arms back to your waist. Inhale. And exhale, lifting your chest, lengthening the arms. And bring them back to your waist. And now, for the last movement, place your hands above your knees. Inhaling deeply here. Exhale, fold down, lengthening down, letting your head go, your body drop forward, letting your arms come forward wherever they might lay, wherever they might be. Keeping your knees softly bent, and notice, taking a deep breath in. Exhale with a sigh. One more deep breath in. Last time, deep inhale. Exhale with a sigh. And slowly press on your feet. Bring your hands back above your knees and rise up, curling your body up, lifting your arms with palms up to the sky. Place your palms together. Bring that down to your heart, feeling the energy here. And release to the sky, release to the room, and to the earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. That was lovely as always. Thank you so much. Thank you. What I'd like to do is I want to say one thing. I I focus very much on John Lewis today and his passing. And I also want to note that another icon of the civil rights movement also died, in the last couple of days. I'm not sure he died Friday as well, but the Reverend C.T. Vivian, who's another kind of great figure as icon of the movement as well. So if I focus on John Lewis, I kind of also want to speak for all those who've struggled, particularly in the civil rights movement and its current day expression, to really work for justice and freedom for all beings everywhere. So wanted to just to say that. And what I'd like to do, we're going to have another meditation in a couple of minutes, but maybe just take a couple of folks share. And I'd really just warmly invite anyone to just share a few words in the chat about kind of how you're doing. It doesn't have to be about this weekend or John Lewis or even the theme of the talk today, but just to whatever's alive for you, please feel free to use the chat for that. And I'll certainly, I think we can save the chat. I mean, I know we can save the chat, and I'm definitely going to do that. So just Cassie is very good at this. Find out who has their hands up. I'm going to go into see if there's maybe the chat room. I think Julie shared a little. If it's okay, if I share what you shared there, Julie, I have had the great fortune of working with Congressman Lewis on writing and promoting his Every Child Deserves a Family Act, a bill to end discrimination against LGBT foster and adoptive parents and children. He was also writing the congressional amicus brief against such discrimination for the Fulton and City of Philadelphia coming before the Supreme Court this fall when he died. You can see a short video of him speaking on this topic. And Julie's put the link there. He truly saw everyone as part of his beloved community. Thank you for mentioning beloved community as well, which is kind of a vision really of Dr. Martin Luther King as well, of that it is possible that this living together in society, we can be a beloved community. Thank you for sharing that, Julie. And as I say, if anyone would like to share anything in the chat box, do that. And if anyone has anything you'd like to share briefly, raise your hand either physically or through a reaction, a hand wave or a thumbs up or whatever.
Sue Rubin has her hand up.
Who does?
Sue
Rubin.
Sue, please go ahead.
Well, first of all, I wanted to share that I was so moved, and I am so moved by what John Lewis and every human being who has put again and again and again their life, their privileges on the line for a purpose bigger than their own. It takes more courage than I can imagine. Really. I'm just in awe. So that's the first thing. Okay. And the second is to share, and really everything you hit on kind of feeds into this. I have a situation and going on, and I'm going to share a little bit about it because I bet a lot of people can relate, which is that I was rear-ended, a lot of serious injuries, and my own insurance company is offering only a teeny bit, like a tiny nothing that doesn't even cover medical bills. And it brings me to something, it triggers or something huge in my life, which is this helplessness in the face of an entity or people who are more, who have power to do what they will with me, with my life, and not being able to do anything about it, and that what they're doing, the specifics, are completely unjust, unreasonable, unfair, and unjust. And so, of course, that brings us back to the human rights, all the human rights fights, I guess. It is that. And then in my own life, that is kryptonite for me. And I really, really want to continue. I've taken a lot of action, and it's, I know I have to let it go in terms of my heart and my anger. And at the same time, I always, and I would really, really, really welcome what you have to say about this. At the same time, my heart is so heavy, and I'm really angry that that these bullies, being my company's Geico, which is like one of the biggest, is getting away with exploitation. It's hard to find peace with that.
Sue, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, as you said, I think many will be able to relate and empathize with what you're saying, that sense of somebody with power and, not having the ways of really responding or dealing with it. And, as many of you kind of probably familiar with the serenity prayer, I think that's kind of, it's very much, so it may come out of another tradition, but it's very much the Dharma, the teachings, to change what we can change and what it's wise and discerning to change, to accept what we can't change. If we truly, it's just, this is the way it is, then to really learn that what we can change is we can change our own way that we respond to what's going on. We can change, we can respond with kindness rather than anger, for example. But it's a training and a practice. So what I want to do, I'll just maybe invite any more sharing in the chat. And if we could just move into our final meditation. Thank you for your sharing, Sue, and thank you for everyone sharing in the chat and for your practice. So let's just take, this will be a relatively short final meditation of maybe 10 minutes or so. So again, just as we did earlier with the earlier meditation, just take some moments to settle and arrive. Let your attention come into the body, come down into the body. As you connect with your body, you might do a brief scan, see if there's any area where you might relax a little bit more. Maybe the shoulders, perhaps the facial muscles, the muscles around the eyes, maybe the belly or chest. And letting the breath help you settle. So it may be taking a few deeper breaths, inviting a relaxing, letting go as you breathe out. remembering the smile as a resource that we can come back to, we can connect with. If we're stressed or experiencing a strong emotion, a smile can be a way of just opening up some space, even if we're not feeling particularly happy or joyful. It's to invite the expression of a smile and help us deal with stress and worry. And a powerful support when we're dealing with strong emotions or neediness or craving something or wanting something, is to consciously come back and reflect on what we have. Reflect on gratitude. Take some moments to think about what we do have in our lives, rather than focusing, as we do a great deal of the time, on what we don't have or what's wrong or what's a problem. Just doing that shift, that changing of the channel, if you like. Connecting with what we do have, what we appreciate in our lives and are thankful for, grateful for. And whenever you're ready, just opening to whatever is present for you in the body, in the heart, in the mind. And the invitation is to meet whatever is here with acceptance and with kindness. Whatever's present. Remembering that peace is possible, peace is available to us here and now, whatever the circumstances, whatever the conditions, we can find peace, experience peace, know peace. Dorothy Hunt's poem reminds us that peace is possible, whatever the conditions, whatever the situation. She says, do you think peace requires an end to war, or tigers eating only vegetables? Does peace require an absence from your boss, your spouse, yourself? Do you think peace will come some other time than now, than here? Do you think peace will come some other place than here, some other time than now, in some other heart than yours? Peace is this moment without judgment. That's all. This moment in the heart space, where everything that is welcome. Peace is this moment without thinking that it should be some other way, that you should feel some other thing, that your life should unfold according to your plans. Peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. In these final few minutes of the meditation, if it speaks to you, you might breathe in a wish of kindness, of compassion for yourself, for any pains, any difficulties, any unmourned grief that you are feeling or experiencing. Just breathe in a wish of compassion for yourself. It might be accompanied by a word or a phrase, kindness, care, or may I be happy, or may I be safe. If it's hard to be kind to yourself, you might send a wish, may I be kind to myself. If it's hard to accept yourself as you are, you might just send a wish, may I accept myself as I am. Breathing in a wish of compassion, kindness to yourself. And as you breathe out, you might send a wish or intention of compassion to someone else, to someone who's suffering, someone in need, or maybe to a whole group of people. people who are incarcerated, or people living in the midst of war or conflict, or those experiencing fear around the virus and their health or the health of their loved ones, or their economic security or insecurity, fear of losing a job. Just sending a wish of compassion, of kindness. May you be safe. May you be well taken care of. And we'll finish with another old favorite poem of Wendell Berry, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Thank you. Thank you all. We're going to finish with some short announcements, and I'll share a few brief things for myself, and then we'll hand it over to Michelle today, I think, who's going to do if I've got it right.
That's right.
Very good. Just want to mention next week, we're going to have a guest teacher for the class. It's Regina Flanagan, who's taught a number of times when we were in person back at the old Center for Mindful Living, or not at Iona, but back at the center in Tenleytown. And I'm teaching a retreat, and it doesn't finish till that morning, and it's not one where I can kind of incorporate it all together as we did with a weekend a little bit earlier. So having a guest teacher, Regina, I think you'll really enjoy hearing her teaching, since she's been practicing a long time and teaching for quite a while. So that's one thing. The second thing I mention is, if anyone's interested, I know 1-2 folks are already, I think, signed up or signing up. I have an online retreat that's being offered by Southern Dharma down in Asheville, or near Asheville, Hot Springs, Western North Carolina, but it's obviously online now. And it's on cultivating peace and joy in these difficult times. be a lot of focus on cultivating mindfulness and compassion and the other qualities we emphasize. And that'll be beginning on Wednesday evening and going through Sunday lunchtime. So if anyone is interested in that, let me know. Put a note in the chat box. And from the July 22nd to 26th, I can give you more information. I think the last thing I want to share is just on the, as many of you, probably most of you are familiar, there's not a set cost for the class, but you're invited to give dana or generosity, which is how the teachings have come down through 100 generations, which is pretty extraordinary, and have come to us. We keep this tradition going as the teachings have come to the West in the last, 40, particularly in the form we have them in the last 40 to 50 years. And so you're invited, if you like, to give dana to me for my livelihood of teaching, and other teachers when they're teaching. And so thank you for your support. And in these times, as you know, dana in the broadest sense is really important, because so many people are experiencing such difficulties. So remembering generosity in the broadest sense, I'd really encourage us to do that. And I think that's it. Then we'll come back after at the end and I'll